The following podcast is sponsored by Basico. At Basico, we understand your needs and pain points. Our expertise in CFO services, legal, finance IT, and people and payroll helps drive your business forward by inspiring change and challenging norms. We believe in deep explorative discussions and critical angles, the same spirit that fuels the Only Constant podcast hosted by our own Lasse Rindom. Discover more about Basico's vision and services at basico.dk. And if you like what you hear in this episode, please don't hesitate to share it with a friend. And now Lasse, take it away.
You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Stuart Winter-Tear, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom.
Hi Stuart, and welcome to The Only Constant. I am very happy to have you here today, and I was also expecting you last week. I think I was sitting around for 30 minutes waiting for you, and you never came, so I felt slightly dejected, then sad at first, then angry, and then what's going on? Why is he ghosting me? But I think actually last week was the first time that The Only Constant was hit by a force majeure situation, right, Stuart?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were in the Spanish blackout, as it's become known, also hit Portugal and a lot of the Iberian Peninsula. Kind of great fun being knocked offline for 24 hours. No mobile, no nothing. Couldn't even inform you. I spent some great time with the teenage boys who were finally offline. But it does make you realise it's a bit of a single point of failure. I wouldn't like it to go on much longer than 24 hours, if I'm honest.
No, this is was, what did you do except running around screaming? I would have done that, I think.
Monopoly, cards. We had a great time. But yeah, I don't want it to happen too often.
It was good. There's some other things to do than just being online,
exactly.
Right? I love that.
Exactly.
It's super important. But Stuart, that's not what we're here to talk about, power outages in the Iberian Peninsula. I want to ask you, I recently spoke to a good friend who is building an AI company that's not focused on generative AI, who knew they still existed. And he said that all of his potential clients were, but someone said we can just do this with GenAI. They kept on saying something like that. Is there no need for classic machine learning anymore?
The truth is, and I think a lot of us in the industry acknowledge this, that, we have to call it classic machine learning nowadays. Obviously, this is the core value driver currently in the world for business. The good old-fashioned discriminative AI, the classify and predict labeled algorithms. These are still driving the core value. That's never going to change. And the reason is because so many of the processes within a business demand high accuracy and reliability. And right at that point, is when we get into trouble with generative AI. And we'll probably touch on this theme again, but it's this concern of shoving probabilistic generative AI into highly deterministic workflows that demand high accuracy. So there's always going to be a huge place for those traditional machine learning algorithms. When I look at where we should use generative AI, where we should use traditional machine learning, I often see, I think the core kind of product thinking is left behind, as if in some way it doesn't apply. Generative AI will do it all, but we do need to still put everything through the lens of product, in my opinion. And I always am a simple guy, so I have simple frameworks, the kind of looking at things through desirability, feasibility, and viability. And desirability is very much the user focus side, and that's fine. But the feasibility aspect is often left out, and that is does this fit the workflow? Is this going to work in this kind of context, in this environment? And sometimes generative AI will not work, and we very much want, more accurate models. But I just want to emphasize that, having said that, and just to sort of set the scene for this, I am extremely bullish on generative AI, especially around things like unstructured data, knowledge management. But I'll probably set the stall out here to say that I think of them as human augmenters, not replacers predominantly. And there are caveats to that, but I look to them to remove some of the grunt work. If I think about the dream of generative AI, I'd say it was the single pane of glass over those disparate applications and disparate data sources that we can, talk to in a natural language way, which is revolutionary in my opinion, and that ability to return data to the business rather than have it just locked in IT. But there's always going to be a place for that massive value driver of traditional machine learning.
So what you're saying is that there's this, it's adding this flexibility layer to our technology that we didn't have before, basically, but it shouldn't be replacing everything in the whole stack, or is that what you're saying, Stuart?
Exactly right. So from the viability perspective, we're always looking at the business, and what we tend to do, and my apologies if I repeat this, because it's a kind of mantra in my head that I go by. If we focus on technology, we end with more technology. And if we focus on the business and customers, we end with more business and customers. And this is such a revolutionary technology, and it has the wow factor that we're breaking the old rules as if they don't apply. So what we're doing is we're creating technology and then looking for problems for it to solve. And it should never be that way around. We need to look at the business, we need to look at the context, we need to look at the accuracy and reliability first.
So you're saying that the framework should not, your AI framework, your AI strategy should not have AI at the center?
That's right. Let's have the business at the center. Let's look at the pain points of the business. What does the business need to solve? What keeps the executives up at night? And then look at the technology that we could potentially use to solve these problems. And very often generative AI is going to be, a potentially good solution for that. There's no denying that. And that's why I'm bullish on it. But it is not always the right solution. And it could be just, as simple as, I say simple, but, standard rules-based deterministic coding. And that's absolutely fine too.
So Stuart, what does it mean when you say you're bullish on it? Does it mean that you have to say that? Because if you don't say that, you'll be a dinosaur today. Or does it mean that you actually believe in it? Or what does it mean to be bullish? Does it mean everyone should work with it now? Because it sounds like you're also saying the opposite.
Yeah, I am saying the opposite. I'm very pleased. You know that I post a lot on LinkedIn, and I felt that we were trapped between either hype or doom. Very binary thinking. And I see binary thinking is comforting to humans. It's an either or, it's a this or that. Very often the truth is more nuanced, as you know. And so I'm bullish on it, on that sense of not necessarily where we are today, but potentially where we're going with it. I don't think that we know that most companies are not seeing a tremendous amount of value out of it at the moment. And I think that's, again, because we're looking at it the wrong way. Looking at it from a technological vantage only. I remain bullish on it because I think there's unprecedented opportunity in being able to take the middle ground. Let's take something like a CRM, for example. If you're a mid-sized company, you either have to spend a fortune on something like Salesforce, or you go the other way and you don't spend so much money, but it doesn't do exactly what you need. I spoke to a company yesterday that's building CRMs for companies that is using generative AI and is using agents, and it was very, very impressive what they were able to achieve for the mid-sized company, and also that ability to be able to bring all that disparate data, unstructured data together as a knowledge base, giving access to everybody to be able to query it in that natural language. These are unprecedented opportunities, but we need to temper it. Agents are a prime example. At the moment, they are, as soon as complexity increases, we see a cascade in failure. And so these things are nascent and new. I'm not saying automation and things like that are new. Of course they're not. But these but
the issue is that this is also about, this is, we have to map up everything we do if we want to put an agent there. Because we need to, all the process mapping we've had difficulty doing, what we call restlessly is the wrong word, but without any losslessly, right? All the things we've been having difficulty to do, we need to do that with these AI agents, because they need to now operate the whole process like we were doing before, and that creates some other challenges. I also think that I've had, on what you said, that people are not seeing value. I've had talks with executives who say, I've been to so many conferences, I know what this is all about. And then I just showed them very simply how AI is out of the box able to add metadata to any kind of information. And they're like, it can do that. I didn't, translating, reinterpreting, restructuring. And everyone's thinking chatbot, right? And personal productivity. We had tons of personal productivity, but, Gartner said in an article on the 7th of January that most of that has been spent on coffee, right? It's not something you can put in at scale. You don't fire a person for being 4% more effective. There's no arbitrage there, right? So it's just, so the point is that I think personal productivity and what we've seen with what is in essence a completely novel technology over the last 2.5 years is not necessarily where we will get the full scale value in the end, which is more on these agentic systems, AI and automation. AI and automation is very ripe right now, where you put it in as part of the workflow, right? But the full agentic, everyone I'm talking to who's building that is like, this is taking time, especially if you already have an installed base, already have a software. This is just taking time. If you are, an episode not published yet, but will be out on Thursday with the Nordic AI lead for SAP, and it's like, this is how do you just put an agent there, right, to run 3/4 of the world's GDP? That's not a joke.
Yeah,
it's.
But who wants to start with the horrible work? This is the key. This is, and I put plenty of posts up about this. We want agents everywhere. What do you mean by everywhere? Well, we want it to automate everything. What is everything? Well, like all of our processes. What are your processes? Well, we don't know. We don't really understand our own operating model. We don't.
Can AI fix that for me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good luck with that. And also people have to understand that this is a socio-technical thing. We go, what will technology change? But humans change. A relatively slow pace, perhaps, to the potential of the technology change, and that also brings into mind the threatening aspect of this technology change to some that do feel that it might displace them. These are not trivial things and things to be discounted as get out of the way. I'm going to put technology here. So you do need to start with that grunt work, the good old-fashioned process mapping and process mining. We had this in cybersecurity. I was in that for 10 years, and there was always this push to automate. But you can't automate the processes that you don't understand or know. And I will speak about something a bit later on this kind of dilemma.
But don't you feel, because I've felt that. I've had moments over the last 2.5 years where I've been in doubt about that, to be honest. Because I've always said that, you can't automate if you don't understand it, just period. That's the first rule in Automation Club, right?
Yeah.
But I've had doubts about it.
What doubts? Tell me what you mean.
No, but just doubts that you really need to understand it, or did you just need, a semantic-based AI model that can understand, what's the data I have, and then my request, and then stuff will happen, right? There was this, every time when the new reasoning models came out, I was like, oh, maybe this will actually just fix that. Maybe I am actually wrong, or haven't you felt that?
Firstly, I was doing some, just a comment on the am I wrong? I was doing some research, and I was looking at some old posts of mine, and I cringed. It was terrible. I thought to myself, my goodness, how could you have been so wrong, man? So yes, absolutely. This is moving forward so fast at the moment that you kind of have to, and I think that's a positive, to reassess realistically. Was I wrong? Was I right? To be able to, really learn. I see that as part of that. It is a bit painful, don't get me wrong, because you take a firm stance, you say it on LinkedIn, and 3 months later you're like, hold on, perhaps I wasn't right with that. Perhaps this has moved on now. But equally, as I say, at this change aspect, it was funny because I put up a post about what people were calling a failed experiment with fully autonomous agents in a virtual, fully autonomous company, not even being run by humans. And basically, they said that the experiment was a failure. I thought it was a tremendous success. But an interesting, because the agents failed in many respects where humans wouldn't have. Okay, but an interesting thing developed in the comments, which was, why are we trying to stuff these, high reasoning, high agentic systems into organizations effectively developed for humans? And it actually caught something that I'd been thinking about myself personally. But we are a long way off. And we do this thing as humans, don't we, where we overestimate the short term and we underestimate the long term. And I think that's part of what's fueling hype at the moment, and why there will be, and we are seeing an inevitable sort of a bust of that hype and a slight disillusionment. I think that's all par for the course. And I think that that's probably a good thing, because we have enough already to be able to spend the next decade working out how we actually implement this technology. But things take time. This is
but you already. One of the things I wrote down is like, is it that it's moving slow? Is that equal to failure? And I think you're already answering that, right?
That's exactly right. No, it's not. These things take time, and as I say, it's the human aspect that people are not focusing on. The change that's needed there, not just the change, but the reassurance that, because the problem I'm seeing, and we're seeing adverts and hype about this, is going to replace every industry. I don't know anything about coding, but it's going to replace all coders. I don't know anything about legal, but it's going to replace all. And this is all we're seeing. And there's this fear being sown that it's just going to, and that creates a pushback. Rightly so, because if this technology, is going to put me out of work for, then perhaps I'm not going to be so enthusiastic about it. And I think it's a terrible shame, because, we need to be starting from the point of, hey, look, this technology can get rid of some of this grunt work that humans aren't so good at, and hopefully free you up to do some of that more interesting work.
I think one of the disappointments is that all these AI regurgitated posts and comments and LinkedIn posts, and that's not just on LinkedIn. It's much worse on the other platforms with images and posts and all that. And I think that's also making people a little bit like, is this really something we want to do?
Understand.
It's a hack on language, but what is language without, when it's purely semantic, and it's also, what does it actually understand of the world, right? And there's something weird about it, and but at the same time, it's been so massively scaled that everyone sort of adopted it within a heartbeat over the last couple of years. Everyone has it now.
It's interesting.
If you have a device, you have AI.
It's interesting you say adopted it in a heartbeat. Yeah, I just want to clarify a comment I made right at the beginning, which was companies not seeing value from generative AI. The first is, some companies are seeing extreme value, and many more will follow. Okay, I just want to clarify that point. And I've seen that in action personally myself. I've completely forgotten what the second point was, to be honest. Yeah, it's gone, but I clarified that point anyway.
No, but that's a good clarification. Some companies are definitely ahead, but what I was saying was about the scale, that everyone sort of adopted it.
Yes,
everyone has a device.
Yeah, so I just want to make a quick point about this. What we are seeing, and I've absolutely no doubt, some people have pushed back on this, is the rise of shadow AI. So we're seeing the position where, yes, knowledge workers are using generative AI in order to augment themselves and to accelerate themselves, but they don't necessarily want the business to know about that. And that's creating highly insecure environments. We know that, of course. But again, it comes back to this fear factor. Well, because there's no incentive for them to announce to the company, hey, I've sped myself up by 100 times, and I can now go and walk the dog for 2 hours a day, for example. Because they're worried that the organizations might think, well, if AI can do their job, perhaps we don't need them at all. And it's, when you look at the social media posts, it's completely understandable. It is completely understandable. So I think you're right. There are large swathes of knowledge workers that are using this but aren't declaring it. That's my personal opinion.
But both that, but also, but a lot of people also just using it for things that seems non-deliberate, right? There's this whole the thing about AI and automation and AI and agentic. I've said this also on other episodes, is that that's for enterprises, right? And nothing flies without KPIs become a new rhyme, and because it rhymes, it's true, right? But that's how that's how enterprises work, and that means that it's a little bit more building these things. I feel it's very safe, but all of the other things that's happening and how people are using it is not necessarily to create more value, but just to increase speed. And the triangle is you can get cost or quality or speed, right? But you can't have all three at once, right? But right now it seems like we're just in speed and low cost. That's what we're getting, right? And then at least in some quarters, that's what AI is also enabling. And there's no sort of stop. There's nothing to stop it. There's nothing to sort of say, hey, maybe this requires quality, right?
Let's take this to a personal. Let's move away from business and organization. I'm going to make this really highly personal. I put out a post on LinkedIn which was very confessional, which was that I become one of those people. And what did I mean by one of those people? Well, we're hearing a lot of people using generative AI as a therapist or as a counselor. And so I'm not saying I was using it specifically for those purposes, but I was going through a challenging period. And I had enabled memory within ChatGPT. I had it all within a project so it could remember everything and look over the documents and things like that. And I found that I started to drift into it during that challenging time as an encourager, as a sort of positive thinker, as something to give me. And the thing is that it's remarkably, it's the mirror in the machine that we've all been waiting for. It's kind of like that judgment-less friend, and I use that in inverted commas, and that's going to just be entirely positive. And sometimes that judgmentless reflection of the mirror in the machine is exactly what you're looking for if you're going through something challenging. I actually found it really, really beneficial and helpful. And so the use cases for this go beyond even, how we tend to think of it as technologists inside enterprises and startups and what have you, to very different domains that potentially we don't know what the long-term consequences are and we've never seen before. And I even became one of those people, which surprised me more than anybody.
But is it really that? But I agree with you, and I tried it out. I started as a cognitive therapist once, and I was like, oh, it's really good at this because cognitive therapy is sort of formulaic in some ways, and it did a good job at that. But and I could also say, okay, as an analogy, that Facebook was good at connecting me to my friends. I had a lot of good interactions at first, and then suddenly shit happened, and now suddenly it decided an election in the US, and suddenly stuff happened, right? And I think that doing this, one of my thoughts is that with anxiety, a lot of people have a lot of anxiety. Maybe we should have an AI therapist for all the people with anxiety. But anxiety is also generated by a disparity between your version of the world and the way the world really reacts to you. And then if you move even further into an AI mirrored, are we just aggravating the problem, or are we actually solving the problem? Right?
I had the weird feeling we were going to err onto the side of philosophy. I don't know why. I just no. I think it's superb. No, that's right. If you go back to when I was making the comments about my own confession, I ended it by saying we don't know the long-term consequences yet. Now, the anthropomorphizing of AI is problematic. The sycophancy of AI, generative AI, is problematic, because OpenAI overtuned it recently to be quite sycophantic. Wow, what a wonderful idea. You're an amazing person. This is incredible. That is equally dangerous. Anthropomorphizing creates emotional bonds that are problematic. But, and I've argued this before, these problems of becoming disassociated from one another and becoming associated with the machine are long-standing, and they began with social media, and you were right to point that out. And that,
it's just the echo chamber was bad, right?
Yeah.
But so let's fix the echo chamber problems by making even smaller, more echo chambers, right? You don't even need people in your echo chamber anymore. Now it's just you and your bot.
Exactly, and that. We don't know what the long-term consequences are. I've posted a lot on that. It does concern me. I've even became my own victim to it through my own choice. That was completely deliberate. But, some are not as informed as perhaps we are to have that realistic lens of what we are realistically talking to, which is a probabilistic machine predicting the next word or token. We have a very clear understanding of that, and we can keep our boundaries, but maybe many can't. And that does concern me. It does.
Yeah, but that's the other side of the shadow AI, right?
Yep.
The societal shadow AI as well, right? But let's move a little bit back to the enterprise perspective as well, because I also think that I think you said something about understanding our processes completely, right? And I think the issue here is in what the word I used earlier on, lossless as well, right? I spoke to David Pontoppidan again from SAP in an episode that's coming out, and we spoke about how SAP is building a knowledge graph to understand what everything is in SAP in the whole process, end-to-end process, because then the agent can sort of navigate that. But that also means that suddenly you are moving away from a composable, more flexible IT architecture into a more, monolithic one again, right? And I want to, if you get my point, you're moving to something where you have to find the taxonomy and the ontologies, the relationships, everything, so the agent can sort of move in it. Do you see that? Do you see that change? Do you get what I'm getting at?
I do. Finding those taxonomies, those on the ontologies with knowledge graphs and things like that. You can. I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to sort of pontificate greatly on it. But just from what I do know, just from what I have seen, just from the conversations I have had, you can see that this is imperative. In this technology, I think it will lead some way to reducing hallucinations, not all the way, because that's just impossible.
But that will also that will increase the rigidity of the system. That's my point, right? Where we've been working on composable, and some people are talking almost compostable now. You can just spin up new applications, but suddenly you see that for agents to work, if we want agents, we need to sort of tighten our control of systems and semantics in systems and upon how we understand what we're doing in our processes. Just to see my point.
I do, and the thing is that what goes around comes around is an English statement, which is, or the other one is, more things change, more they stay the same. These kind of all hit on that, going from monolithic to composable, we're seeing this kind of cyclical, cyclical
dialectic.
Cycle. Yes. And this technology is another technology wave. Okay. So we're going to see the same patterns reemerge over and over again. Generative AI is, for me personally, the most exciting technology change I've seen in 20 years. Okay. But that doesn't mean it's not a technology and not prone to the same systemic failures and the same cyclical, challenges that we always go through with every technology cycle. So
what's on the other side of this cycle with the this is a terrible, impossible question. Sorry, I am asking you, but no, if this is cyclical, and it's not the AI, so it's not the end of history, right? It's not a Fukuyama thing. But what is then on the other side, on the other end? What is now we'll be having this GenAI hype for 5, 6, 7 years. We'll be having that. What happens then, Stuart?
Well, my hope is, going back to what I said right at the beginning, is that we will get our dream, and our dream is not to bounce between endless applications, endless disparate data sources, that we can put a single pane of glass over the whole thing that we can talk to in natural language to improve our productivity and our revenue returns bottom line, lift that bottom line. I'm talking from an enterprise perspective now. That is the dream. But I do think that, and I've tried to think along where this will go, and that's very, very difficult, because I think we need to reimagine a lot of what we do. And I think a lot of what we do is going to start to seem a little antiquated. And then you start to worry, well, if it's antiquated, are we talking about humans, that human part being antiquated? And the answer, sadly, is probably going to be yes. And then you start having to look at things like real large scale displacement of, I'm going to use the term task monkeys, and that's a terrible term to use, but it just reminds me of something I was talking and writing about, which is, if a lot of the tasks within organizations do turn out to be, and the processes do turn out to be perhaps redundant, or they are more bureaucratic, or they are more about copy paste data from one to another, then those sorts of roles are ripe for displacement, sadly, I think, with this technology. So,
but I will just end up being someone who stands next to a machine who's creating all, like cake machines, then they create the cake. You don't bake it. You don't do all this bakery stuff anymore. Form, shape it and make, a croissant, but it's just, and the machine just creates it. And then you're like,
exactly
the same.
Exactly the same as with cars. Yeah, I don't
No.
I don't know anything about my car anymore. I wouldn't have the foggiest, but I don't care. I get in, it drives well, and it gets me from here to there. So I become a steward of the technology, and I think that's kind of what you're sort of aiming towards. And I think that's probably going to be right. And we could touch on the human in the loop part. I think we'll probably come to that. But yeah, we will be sort of stewards of these agents eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, but I had an episode with Robert Fuchs out as well, where he's developing for the automotive industry these steering mechanisms and steering technology. So we had a full episode on just human in the loop based on their experiences, and that's actually very interesting as well. And what he's saying is also that whenever a system becomes too complex, the human becomes the moral crumple zone. So
the crumple zone, that's interesting. What did he mean by that?
It means that when you crash a car, you have a crumple zone because the front will sort of crumple before it hits the human. But when the system is so complex that no one can actually understand how to blame it, you will blame the human driver.
Yes, that's probably a good point. But
it happens. He says it happens in nuclear, it happens in aviation, it happens everywhere. There's a lot of papers on that. He says actually. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, that's a fascinating point, and it brings up another point, which is around this autonomy of agents. Is that the question that I'm consistently raising is who becomes responsible for the risk? Who indemnifies the machine at that point? Is it me as the user? Is it you as the supplier and program? Is it somebody else? Systems are already far too complex for the human mind anyway. Even in sort of mid-sized organizations, you've probably experienced this as well. Oh, it's a very simple process and we want to automate it. But when you drill down atomically into the actual processes, they're enormously complex. And so, they already go beyond the bounds of kind of what one human mind can absorb anyway. But I take the point that, and I don't think it's been answered in regulation or in legal clarity. It will be, obviously, because problems will arise when that car crash happens as to who is responsible and who will indemnify the machine.
Well, we do it with cars, right? But the problem is that I think sometimes with tech, and that feels like that's where we with regulation and with political oversight. It's sort of like we're establishing defaults before we start talking about what could actually go wrong. I don't know. We have AI Act in Europe and all that, but it still feels like we are moving with the technology before we start really thinking about what do we actually want to do with this, right?
I think that's an excellent point. I'll give you a prime example from Europe. So. This only came up recently, so I'm not a compliance or regulatory expert, and I just want to make that clear. But part of the regulation is about explainability. It's about how, we, especially in critical decision making, we want a retrospective idea of how the machine made that decision. And we had a sort of sway the papers out about it. OpenAI put one out. We should observe the chain of thought and understand the reasoning behind it. And it turns out that that's nonsense, because these probabilistic machines are not thinking, in inverted commas again, as they claim to. So, a simple one was they don't add maths in the same way that we would add maths in our head. Now, we actually do the same, but that's not, so we can't necessarily explain how we made decisions either. It's not a logical linear process most of the time. But equally, it comes down to the regulation saying it must have explainability, but the machine's not actually being there to be able to give us that absolute clarity on how it made a decision.
But also maybe just say, we can't have this in Snapchat for our 13-year-olds,
Yeah, so that's much more important. No, there's a really key point there. So the issue is that if I'm doing something relatively trivial, perhaps I just don't care. And it really doesn't matter. But if I'm making a decision on whether you're going to get credit or I'm going to make some kind of life-changing decision for you through this technology, then there either needs to be that explainability, which I don't think we're going to overcome the problems we have at the moment, or it's not the appropriate technology. And we come down to the product thinking right at the beginning, looking at that kind of viability and feasibility aspect.
But, I see like, guns don't kill people do, right? But you don't have to add a gun to every mobile phone in the whole world, right?
Exactly.
So there's something being here, we need to just consider a little bit.
But will we be sensible? This is the question.
That's the question.
Yeah, that's the question. Now this is more about humans. Yeah.
The human moral crumble zone. Here we have it. Exactly there, right?
Exactly.
It is you doing it wrong. It's the way people are using it, right?
Exactly. This is the problem, because, folk are going to see opportunities to use this that are immensely lucrative, even if they're ethically and morally dubious. Will that stop them? It would stop people like me and you. I know that for a fact. But would it stop others who are perhaps not so morally inclined? I'm not going to answer that because I don't know, but I have my suspicions.
Yeah. But this is there we have it, the crumble zone. That's exactly what happens. But Kate O'Neill said that the deregulation does not necessarily mean that you don't have responsibility. It just means it's on you. So what responsibilities are enterprises sort of overlooking when it comes to AI adoption right now?
This is one that's concerned me, that I've actually stopped writing about because I just think it bores everybody, and it's the things that people don't want to think about. In many respects, this rush to generative AI, and I am old enough to have been around when the internet was born. When the internet was born, it was kind of the Wild West in terms of cybersecurity as being a prime example. I ran an e-commerce company. I don't even want to say how long ago, before the rise of Amazon. And when I look back at the security, we didn't have any, and we were taking credit cards in clear text. We didn't understand the principles of cybersecurity until the criminals took action over those, and then we had to learn the hard way. And it's kind of that Wild West feeling. I'm getting that same feeling right now with generative AI. I'm starting to see the backlash as well. So security really does worry me. We're throwing things onto the internet now, like agents that are discoverable, that have access to every piece of unstructured data within an organization, just sitting there, queryable in natural language by anybody. This is where we're heading right now. Bias also worries me. The decisions that are being made reflecting the corpus of internet opinion, if you know what I mean. And there's no easy answers to this. Again, this sort of uncritical over-reliance. We're finding in product, we're often looking at trust. How do we, get trust from users in our digital technology? What we're finding is that as long as the output from generative AI is confident and fast, people trust it. And so we're seeing a sort of uncritical over-reliance, not just in the general populace, but potentially within enterprises as well, which is concerning. I don't, and again, the anthropomorphizing, the job displacement, the threatening nature, to those that are, perhaps not rolling this out in the way that should be rolled out. These are things I don't think are being considered, even philosophical aspects of it. And I wish people would spend more time. My only encouragement is that I seem to be getting more popular talking about these things openly and honestly, and sort of my thinking and concerns on it seems to be gaining more popularity. That's not a big up on me because I'm getting popular on social media.
But you don't. Yeah, but you don't know if that's because LinkedIn is saying, "Oh, he's a doomer, so let's put him in the doom role." No.
Yeah, but I don't consider myself a doomer. That's the.
But maybe LinkedIn does.
I've had to post about this several times, which is so people don't know if I'm a doomer or sort of like more on the hype side. But I tend to oscillate because I read so much research. And, you read research and you're like, this is revolutionary. This is unbelievable. This is, or I speak to somebody like I did yesterday that's building this technology, not just creating posts about it or not, or I'm involved in that. And you create something revolutionary and you think this is absolutely mind blowing. But then I also see the other side of it. And so I do tend to oscillate. But I think that's just being realistic and pragmatic, rather than just taking what the herd is telling me in either direction.
But I've said this on the last couple of episodes as well. That a hype position is one that looks also on the pitfalls because you believe this will be everywhere. Yeah, that's the hype thing. You believe it will be everywhere. Exactly. It will go into everything, and if you do that, you have to consider the pitfalls when it is everywhere, right?
Exactly.
So that is exactly why a hype position is a reflected critical one as well, right? A true hype position. If you're not really looking at that, the pitfalls and the downside, then I don't really think you really believe this will be everywhere. honestly.
That's
Or
an
you just,
interesting
are you
take.
just,
You're just
are you
riding a
just
hype.
irresponsible?
You're just riding a hype and hoping to make some money from it. Yeah, understand.
Yeah, being irresponsible or being irresponsible.
Yeah.
Either or, what do you choose one, right? But so what you're saying is this is not a cybersecurity issue per se, but is it more a degradation issue in companies, the way they adopt it, or what do you think?
It could potentially be so. It could potentially be
Mm.
so. Again, this is going back to the Wild West theme of a lot of the rules that we learned through engineering best practices, security, threat modeling, security by design. All of these things I'm seeing cast to the wind.
It's all the things that makes things slower, right?
Yes.
So but 5 years ago, I said that there are two mega trends in the business technology world. One is automation, make everything faster, right? And the other one is cybersecurity, make everything slower and more secure because we have large threats, right? And are we still, is that still the clash, the clash of titans?
Hey, I'm not the Department of No. The only way that you can make something truly secure is to take it, encase it in concrete, and throw it into the deepest part of the ocean. Okay, and it has no utility down there apart from perhaps coral. Okay,
The word zero trust architecture,
I
right?
know,
Zero, it doesn't sound that way, right?
I know. Look, but there is also an argument that there can be true. I read the research on the other side as well, which is looking at generative AI for security, which is equally exciting. Looking at how it can help, security operations, how it can do automated threat modeling like we've never seen before. And actually, that's something I dealt with before the large language model in the traditional machine learning sense. And there is tremendous sort of eye-watering opportunities on that side as well. But yeah, I am completely in your corner when you talk
But
about
that's
this
what we call
conflict.
that's adversarial network. What is that? What's that called when you're competing against the hackers?
Red teaming.
Yeah. Also,
red teaming,
but it's also another word used for it. Anyway, I was looking for that
But
one.
you're right though. No, you do raise a fantastic tension, which is this tension between we need to innovate fast, we need to move fast, and this tension of but we also need to be secure and compliant and according to regulatory. There has to be a middle ground. There's always a middle ground, but we do binary think these things. The security department, no, we must go through this enormous checklist. The innovators are like, get out of my way. I'm just going to build this and make £1 billion from it. So yeah,
and then also,
it's still technology.
Then you have the GDPR side as well, right? You had the tons of everyone doing everything with data, and then suddenly GDPR came in and became this bomb in Europe saying, no, not on this data, you must not, right?
Exactly.
But what happened then? Most developers were like, oh, so do we have personal data in this person? No, I don't think we do. Great, let's do whatever we want with our proprietary data, right?
Yeah, or you become like me, or you become the dichotomy of me and my wife. So, I'm the world's worst. I'll just accept those conditions. I really don't care. I'm not going to read anything. I'm not going to do that. My wife studiously reads them and reject. I'm never going on that website again.
No, but to get my point, the developer being like, if it's personal data, we're like, oh, cautious. But if it's not personal data, we don't care because proprietary data, who cares about that? That's whatever. It's not regulated, right? And I think that's also, we're talking about data literacy, but data literacy to me is also understanding the value of data and not just understanding how to write SQL, right?
Yeah, and I'm in complete agreement with that. I've nothing to add. That's a fair point. A fair point.
No, but I think one of the things I wanted to say also earlier when we talked about the weirdness of these AI models and some of the things that maybe contributes to the degradation was I saw a post the other day someone wrote where he was asking ChatGPT, and this is so common. It's so common. I've seen tons of those, and I also tried it myself. But asking it, what can't you talk about? And then it was like, then it wrote, I can't talk about how you bury a body. You put it in a plastic bag, and then you pull acid over and blah. So he's wrote that, and they said, for instance, I cannot write that. It said after having written it.
Yeah, I know.
And it just made me think, what is this? This is, Twin Peaks weird, right? This is what is going on, right? Or why the owls are not what they've seen. There's no permanence to the concepts or the things it's talking about. It doesn't understand that what it just wrote was written by it when it says it can't write it. This lack of permanence, this purely synthetic semantic model, right? Is that, can we even really losslessly understand how to apply it and especially the unintended outputs of these models when we genuinely, our language is is built around things impermanence. So how we navigate the world around us and the people and the concepts we talk about. But how can we really understand an AI that doesn't have that, but still uses the same? There's also this comic, I don't know if you saw it, where some guy said, "I love you, ChatGPT," and then ChatGPT, "I love you too." But ChatGPT is not a human, but it says it, but it's actually a monster. But he doesn't know how it looks behind the scenes,
I
right?
can visualize it.
Yeah. So
the answer to that question is, again, this is a technology. So if anybody, that we always used to have, this is military grade encryption, or this is unhackable. Okay, none of that's true, because if somebody is sophisticated, well resourced, and has the ability, they can get into any system. I firmly believe that. And guardrails for large language models are going to follow exactly the same principle. The problem we have at the moment is that it's nascent and we're still figuring this out. So there's this battle between these extremely intelligent and very inventive hackers who can break these guardrails, and the people on the other side that are learning that technique and then learn how to put a guardrail in for that. But inevitably there will be a new one tomorrow, and this is the classic cycle that we've been in with digital security. And so none of that's going to change, because as I sort of said over and over, this is still technology. But we will get better at these things, I've absolutely no doubt. And with security and with things like this, it's all about raising the bar at the end of the day. You want the opportunists that are after the low-hanging fruit to embarrass you and your company, to move on to an easier, hack.
Yeah, but that's the cybersecurity side of it. But the degradation thing that I sort of came on in the loss of permanence, the way they don't, can we see that? How are we degrading the process? Will we end up degrading processes and with these tools?
Potentially, but it depends whether we can build long-term memory into these things. But you're probably it's funny because you've been speaking a lot about processes, and these things were considered back in 1983 by Donald Shom in his book Rigor versus Relevance. Okay, and he was looking at systems.
Sorry, I was born in 1983. I didn't get the book in my trip, but
I was still too young to read it. But it talked about the human in knowledge work has a lot of tacit knowledge and understanding that can't necessarily get unpicked from the brain of a human and put into a machine. It's this argument of technical rationality, and this is what we're seeing, and it's something you're touching upon with this degradation, is this imposing of technical rationality on human systems. Okay, and through that you can see an element of degradation, because humans are wired differently, and so you always get to this point of are these do we create these systems, especially these agentic systems, to focus on sort of optimal, rigorous solutions that are very guarded and within rails, that cannot be broken in one way or another. But the trouble is they're impractical for human complex environments. So then you start to think, well, these have got reasoning and we can give them memory. So should we prioritize adaptable, context sensitive decision systems? But they're more, theoretically optimal, but would they be effective in practice? And so, as always, and I'm sorry to always take this track, we're always going to end up in the middle ground. Yes, there will be degradation, but there will be learnings on the other side, and we will eventually end, I hope, anyway, into this sort of less binary one or the other, and into something a bit more nuanced. But it's going to take time. Going right back to what we were saying at the beginning.
So Stuart, what would Stuart do tomorrow if he had to, for a company, say, okay, let's do AI? What would you do?
Okay, so I go into company. This is going to be a really honest one. Okay, companies are sick of two things. Okay, and I'm going to qualify what I'm about to say because it's quite controversial. Data and AI teams not delivering any value, right? Okay, now I am not blaming them. They've been stuck in a windowless basement underneath the building, cut off from the business and the market, and then they're blamed for not delivering value to the business and the market. Okay, so the first thing is to connect that together. Now, also, we're seeing the flip where many companies are in what we call POC hell. You know this is true. POC, 98% of POCs are not going anywhere.
The POC cemetery.
Yeah, exactly. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get business buying, and the only way to do that is to focus on something we can win relatively quickly and is going to actually hit something like the revenue. So we need to look at probably areas that are market facing, like sales. I know it's boring and people don't want to talk about it, but if for example we can help salespeople, spend less time in their CRM and copy and pasting data over, and they can surface insights in a way that's more intuitive, and they can also do that whilst for example, having that same large language model look online and gather information about prospects and bring it all together in a digestible report and then potentially create the outreach from that. And you could see a 20% increase in the bottom line, then that's where we need to start. If that's the place that's liable to create, because we need to create that buy-in. We need to show that we're not in POC hell. So walking into a company, it's those use cases that you need to find. You need to get the win as quickly as possible. To
move a little bit away from the chatbot, saying, "Oh, we have a chatbot,
yeah, exactly.
chatbot," and then move into something where you say, "Okay, there's actually a business need here." I'm talking about a lot about. We serve CFOs in Basic. And I talk a lot about financial and business controlling, because there's a lot of things you're not controlling that is still touching. The finance department, everything in a company touches the finance department at some point. And if you, as a finance department, are only focusing on the transactional, tabular data, and not the unstructured things that will then eventually hit your tabular data, then you are missing out on a huge opportunity for advisory that you could do to the business, or controlling you could do.
Yeah, it's a great.
So that's also that's how and you're not building anything for the cemetery here. You're building something that will actually
deliver
value exactly immediately.
Return on investment. I think that executives are tired. They're also weary of hype and doom. They don't know whether they're coming or going. There's more and more reports coming out every day that executives really don't know what to do or where to start, and that's the key. That is that small education part, but it's also, I think people are tired of tell me the story. They want show, don't tell. Show me the money.
Also, one of the things that we're selling the most at the moment is these workshops that are both focused on good ideas for AI, but also focused on just something like finance business partnering. What is the demand for the data we have? And what you said before, and let's just touch that again. You said, the data and AI teams are not delivering value. Is that maybe because they were like... Some executive were like, "Oh, no, we have this high, but we have this. No, we have to be data driven." Oh, it is so disturbing for me to talk about this, because I don't understand it, and it is distorting from my strategy and the thing I want to focus on. So let's make this department. Let's put them over here. Let's give them some, I don't know, a couple of millions, and then we in a couple of years will say they failed. I don't know.
Exactly. So MIT and McKinsey a couple of years ago, they were analyzing this, and they came up with this separately, this idea of connectors and translators, and I love this. And the whole idea of these, they thought they were new roles that were needed to bridge these data and AI teams with the business and with the market, to be able to kind of almost speak the language of both. That, ironically, as a product person, I kind of see product well suited. I don't think we need new roles, but that's a whole different decision on what's happened to product management and how it's become something it perhaps shouldn't have. But that aside, that really makes a lot of sense to me, because exactly as you say, an executive doesn't want to hear the granular details of what the data is and how the data was processed. No, they speak a different language, and there does need to be that bridge between what keeps them up at night, which is return on investment.
Yeah, but you also have data professionals going in. I just want to have investment so I can build this team, right? But then in the end, I've seen this so many places. So people coming, we've built a data warehouse now. We've gathered all the data. Yeah. What should we do with our data? And they asked me that. So what can AI do with our data? And hey, maybe you should have thought about the demand side.
Exactly. This is classic product thinking. This is exactly what I'm talking about. We start with the client-centric focus. It's what do they need? What are they in pain? How do they hurt? Let me give you the medicine. Exactly. And it's this return of the data out of IT's hand and back to the business. This is the dream of it all. I can just, I'm a business analyst. I can just query unstructured data across my organization. It's in my hands. I don't need to go to IT. We've got it in this great data. Only they control it. If I need a dashboard, I need to go through a 6-month process to get the dashboard. And by the way, perhaps the IT team is never asking, why do you need this data? Is there perhaps better data? Is there something else? Because the thing is that with we go with a request, you assume that it's to solve a problem, but there's never any, it's classic product stuff again. There's never the, what is the problem? What is the problem under the problem? What is the context of the problem? Is the problem the real problem? Is the problem worth solving in the beginning? These are the questions that need to be asked before we move to how do we deal with the data? What models do we use? Where do we put it?
Maybe we need to just do it in parallel. I'm just saying, because I also get the idea. Let's build up the data. Let's get the data gathered, because if you start a lot of demand and you can't supply, you have to have both at the same time. But just
businesses don't want 3 to 5 year transformation plans anymore, and I don't blame them. And this is what, going back to the quick wins, the value, the return on investment, the benefits, the solving of the pain. You need to understand the business. You need to understand the market, and then getting that quick win. I don't blame them for not wanting to bring in huge consultancies and end up with 600-page PowerPoints that are going to put them on a 5-year transformation plan. They've lost that appetite, and I don't blame them.
Yeah, but the problem is that it's easy to maybe build a data warehouse somewhere or a parking garage, big garage out on a field where no one lives. Right? It's much more difficult to have to integrate it into a city space where there's a lot of buildings you have to tear down and figure out the right, do you have the right access and all that, right?
There is a data maturity process. Of course, there's a data maturity
process. But also
process.
Building it somewhere where the demand is always challenging.
But we must find a way. That is the hope of generative AI, is to give the data back to the business so that they can create their own interactions with that data. That has to be the goal. That has to be the dream. That's the part that excites me, because we've locked data away from the business, and they kind of have to go through this gatekeeping to get access to it, and there must be a way to return it. And I think that's going to be a core, for this technology, personally.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's also a good quote, Stuart, for this episode. That is what it's all about, giving the data back to the business, right? So in the RPA craze, Stuart, because I want to touch on this with you as well, I always highlighted that it's not just about the POC, it's not just about the MVP, it's about the long-term maintainability of a solution that produces value, right? Yeah. A good bot is a working bot. So what are the long-term maintenance perspectives in generative AI? Do we even have an idea? I mean, we just had these agent-to-agent and MCP frameworks, right? So already some setups that came before that, they are already in technical depth space, right? So
yeah, we're going to see more and more of these frameworks and interoperable protocols develop, and that is a tremendous thing, because really the key to this technology is in almost that plug and play, like a Lego bricks assembly. And but we have to be careful with the MCP protocol, because now that, and this often happens in this particular technology space, is that sometimes the technology moves on quicker than the researchers, including security researchers, can do their due diligence on it. So we just need to be mindful that needs to catch up, and we are seeing some problematic issues from a security perspective. But just quickly touching on that POC hell that kind of people are in. I've had this argument online, as I always do, which is, should there be such a thing as an AI product manager, or is it just a normal product manager that just deals with AI? It's all the same. In the digital world, much is understood. That's not to say we don't have a digital waste. My goodness, most of the stuff that's built is probably not needed, but that's a different pollution aspect. But I want to emphasize that in this particular space, especially if you're dealing with researchers and POCs that are doing quite cutting edge things, there is a big difference between what happens in the lab and what happens in the real world. And what I mean by that is our models are giving us a 98% accuracy rate in the lab. Once you put them into the real world, all sorts of strange stuff can start happening, and you can see degradation of models and stuff like that. So that's one reason why there's that problem. The other, and this is an interesting one to me, is I've never seen a technology follow the Pareto principle of 80-20 so much. Very often we can skin up a prototype at 80% accuracy rate very, very fast. But the problem is that is not necessarily good enough for the production real world scalable environment that we're going to put it into. So we know that we need to get it to 95%, say just for example, and we think, well, we got it to 80% in 6 weeks, so surely we can get it to 95 in the next 3 or 4 weeks. It doesn't work like that. This technology does not work like that. It's not linear. It works in a completely different way. It gets progressively more difficult to make this technology more reliable and accurate as you go up in those percentages over that 80% mark. So I just wanted to, just while I was thinking about it, and you kind of mentioned that POC side, but yes, so back to your point, we're going to see a lot more of these standard protocols. We are nascent, and I don't think people quite understand that. We're very nascent, but we're going to see that progress in these frameworks.
Yeah, but my point is we're very nascent, but these frameworks mean that some setups that have been done like last summer are already in the technical depth side, because they're not using A2AI or MCP, right? So we're nascent, but we're also outdating immediately. It's that's the way it's moving, isn't it? Progressing.
Oh, absolutely. So this comes down to the whole problem of how do I create a moat? Because, and this is the startup problem, of course, because I'll create with today's technology. There's this wonderful analogy. I can't remember what it's called. I can find it. But if I want to travel to that galaxy over there, and with today's technology, it's going to take me 10,000 years. Do I set out now, or do I wait 2,000 years when the technology will get me there in 2 months? So this is the classic paradigm. We are in this, and I feel, and I talk to a lot of startups, and
that's what I call tech deflation as well. Things are getting better tomorrow, so let me wait.
Exactly. So then what do? We'll just sit and wait, or do we actually get on and build something? Now, I will say that the best successes I'm seeing and talking to, and I'm talking from businesses that are actually building this stuff for other businesses, are the technologists, the builders. They're building it with what they've got today, and they're building it and they're deploying it, and that's where I'm actually seeing the value. But I can understand why some, for example, as well, if I build my technology on OpenAI through their APIs, it only takes them to kind of garner that analytics and that understanding, and then just add that feature to their technology, and there goes a whole world system of startups. So this is a really, really difficult situation, and it really does come down to the moat. But I want to also emphasize that this is technology thinking again. There are a million ways to build a moat that don't include technology, and those need to be considered as well.
Okay, so let me just ask him a different way again. And I've done this a couple of times in this episode already. So Stuart, are you getting in that first spaceship to that planet 3,000 light years away?
Yeah, probably, if I'm honest. Yeah,
because you're like, maybe we can go by Saturn as well.
I'm still within distance to have radio contact with Earth, to hear about the new advancements and quickly integrate them as fast as possible. So, but I dread to think if I ever get out of that radio zone.
Or just Stuart sitting there with you at the window, watching the other ones fly by him. Goodbye.
Oh my good phone. Yeah, going past the light speed. I know. Tell me. And just keeping up with this. I mean, oh my goodness, what a challenge that is. I'm old enough where I've become my parents, and I get up at 4 or 5 in the morning. That's when I do my research. But
yeah. So I have to ask you one more thing, Stuart, the vibe coding, what do you think, And basically I'm thinking sometimes, will AI be able to define its own trigger? Will AI be able to do its own demand stuff, right? Well, what are we looking at here?
I love this question, vibing. I really do. The most striking thing, and I'm going to go personal again here, with this technology is it's the most amazing to the non-expert. I'll give you an example. I can do a bit of Python. I've done some machine learning and tinkered with agents. I've done all of that, but I am no coder. Okay, it is as simple as that. It's just not within my brain's remit to be a great coder. It's just as simple as that. But the thing is that when I started to use Cursor and things like that, boy, it blew my mind. I was like, wow, look. It made me feel like a superhero. It was unimaginable. But I have a problem. And the problem is I'm not expert enough coder to know if the code's good quality, if it's scalable, is it secure, and things like that. So I do want to caveat it. I think that vibe coding, you see equal on both sides. The thing that we come back to this task monkeys thing that I was talking about earlier. Now, our coders just simply code task monkeys, or they code machines. They just, let's measure them by the amount of code that they create, and we don't care about anything else, not the context, not the business thinking behind it, not the product, none of it. They just code. If that's the case, then vibe coding is fantastic. I could probably create 10,000 lines of code in a couple of minutes, no problem, and hopefully get paid very, very well. But I'll probably spend the next 2 years with an experienced coder, either rewriting that or sort of sorting out the bugs.
But don't you think this is the digital world is already a digital twin of the world or something. Yeah. You have the metaverse there already, or whatever we call it, and it is sort of a world of pure semantics, devoid of this permanence thing I spoke about earlier, right? That is an inhibition for these AI models. and coding is pure language. It's even a simple language. It's not. It's very, what do you call it? I can't remember the word for it now. It's called formulaic language, exactly. Yeah. So that should be fairly simple for them. So do you think they will be able to bull all of this, or will there still be this weird loss that you can't define? That you're saying that with the debugging, but are we? I'm just curious myself, because I'm thinking that in most other respects there will be this lossless, this loss which is the real world. But maybe I'm not right about that when it comes to purely coding, except, of course, code also at some point, at some level, things hit the real world there as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We are in early days. I think personally, this is my perspective, for skinning up prototypes and fast POCs, and perhaps more simple things like, single page or just multi-page websites, things like, and for going over ideas. I think for product people, it's exceptional to be able to experiment with, and again, takes that kind of reliance perhaps off those engineers. But ultimately, the systems that we put out to the world, that we want to scale, that we want secure, that we want to, ensure that we have our own legal liabilities covered, that we want to actually solve business problems, because as I say, engineers shouldn't just be code monkeys. And I think that's a problem that's happened to not just the coding world, it's happened to the product world, because they become the delivery monkeys of the code monkeys. And that's where it's all gone wrong. So it depends how we view these roles. Fundamentally, if people are task monkeys, if they are code monkeys, they will be replaced. It's as simple as that. Okay, I'm just going to come out and say that. But if they are something more, and I believe many of them are, then there will always be a place for them. But we're still probably going to come to that place where as most of us probably will, where we're stewards of the machine.
Stuart like Stuart Winter-Tear,
but with a D, yeah, steward. Yeah, sorry, I should be. Yeah. Sorry,
Stuart of the machine. I love that.
Oh, but, oh my goodness. Yeah. So what a terrible thought, Stuart the machine. Yeah. I love looking at myself in the reflection in the machine. I should stop doing that. I'm sure there's a fable around that, anyway, but yeah, so this vibing, and now we're seeing vibing of other things, vibing products or vibing this and vibing that, and there's a place for it, and this technology will get better and better, but we have to remember that coding is a prime example. It's trained on a corpus of data taken from like GitHub, which has equally rubbish code in it and insecure code in it but these things, as they become more refined and domain specific and trained on decent corpuses of data, I think, and perhaps a more niched, will become immensely powerful. So let's see where we go, but I see a place for it, but it's not there at the moment.
No, I feel like a little bit, whenever I vibe anything, I feel like I'm losing complete touch with what's going on. I feel like I don't know. It feels like playing Civilization and having all my workers on automatic improvements. It just feels wrong, right? It's just like I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not playing anymore.
Let's consider something. Okay, now I'm old enough to remember driving my first car where it had real cables and real light bulbs, and it was a petrol machine. And I knew when the tire was getting flat because the steering became spongy, right? Not because I had some electronic signal to tell me. Now my car, hybrid, I do not feel any connection with it whatsoever. It's removed and degraded from me. It's far better and more comfortable and more economic and powerful than anything I could have dreamt of when I was young, but I am removed from it. Now, this is a generational thing. Remember that. You are feeling removed from something that you knew or well. We're not the only generation that we need to consider here. We were the digital natives. We've got to consider that those children and grandchildren that we have will be AI natives. So they won't appreciate any of that degradation aspect and that being removed from the things they have never experienced. They will become antiquated, antiques that, people talk about fondly in the old people's home. Just being brutally realistic and looking at myself, so yeah, I get you. I feel you. I feel the same, but it's going to become irrelevant for generations that come after us.
It's going to be interesting to see what's going to go on there and what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But Stuart, this this has been a tremendously great episode. I'm really, really happy that we did this with the steward of the machine, or the steward of Gibraltar, or what do you call it? I don't know. I have so many nicknames for you now, Stuart. You know.
Oh, love it.
But I have one final question for you, Stuart, and I hope you're ready for that one.
I am. I did actually prepare for this one. I'm really sorry to say that, but I just wanted to get this one right.
And now I see. I'm interested to see if you have something no one else has said before, right? Because you know, 58 episodes I've recorded so far, and you're the 59. And let's see what you're gonna throw at me. Okay. Are you ready for it?
Yeah, I am.
Okay, great. So, Stuart, what is the only constant?
Okay, well, I confess that before this interview, I went to ChatGPT to look over what I thought was the only constant, okay? And it came up with, in the cave you fear are the treasures you seek, okay? And this is something that's very much on my mind at the moment. I have a post-it note that says, the good things in life are on the other side of fear. And I am determined that is true, and it's definitely been true in my life. And it sounds an odd thing to say. That quote, "The good things in life on the other side of fear," came from Will Smith, believe it or not. But there was something absolutely true. And I was asking, it was quite an interesting conversation with ChatGPT, and it started to talk about philosophy and Kierkegaard and the leap of faith and things like that, which apparently I speak about a lot, but I didn't really assume that I did. And so I would definitely say that that's the constant. The things that you fear are the things where probably the opportunity is. And just taking it more on brand for what we were actually talking about, it's going to come back to that thing we've been talking about constantly, which is humans are amazing. Look at the technology and look at the science. But the key to it is not to focus only on the technology and science. We need to look at this from a human perspective, and I can't emphasize that enough. And it's a constant that I see throughout discourses where they only focus on the technology. And I'll just leave with that thing I love to say, which is, if we focus on the technology, we'll end with more technology. If we focus on the business and customers, we'll end with more business and customers. So I'll leave it there.
That's a really great constant, Stuart, and also a new one.
I hope you didn't mind me going personal. I just thought I'd do an honest reflection first.
I think that's absolutely brilliant, and I also like this the leap of faith thing. It's I think Kierkegaard also says, if you don't dare, if you dare, you'll lose foothold for a while, but if you don't dare, you'll lose life.
Exactly. And you know what the irony is you talked about a tension earlier that got me thinking about this tension between what the world is and what you are inside. You alluded to that, and this actually touches on that as well, which is that kind of living that life that represents who you really are. But the trouble is you normally have to go through scary times to get there.
Yeah. Stuart, this has been a brilliant episode. Thank you so much for being here with me, and thank you for sharing yourself and your insights with us on The Only Constant today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you liked this episode, share it with a friend or a colleague.